We live in a world surrounded by these incredibly complex systems. But what happens when they go wrong? Today, we're diving into the book Meltdown to figure out why the very things we rely on most seem so destined to fail, sometimes catastrophically.
Have you ever stopped to think about this? Seriously, we've got financial markets, power grids, global supply chains, systems so sophisticated they feel like magic, and yet they also feel terrifyingly fragile. It seems like one tiny single glitch can bring the whole house of cards down. So, what is really going on here?
Okay, let's take a real-world example, the 2017 Atlanta airport power outage. It all started with just a single electrical fire. One. But that one little spark somehow managed to knock out both the main and the backup power. And just like that, the busiest airport in the world went completely dark. This wasn't just some local inconvenience either. It led to over 1,000 canceled flights and messed up global air travel for days. It's the perfect and frankly terrifying example of how one small problem can spiral into a massive system-wide failure.
Now, you might think these events are just really bad luck, but the authors of Meltdown say, no, not really. These things aren't random. In fact, they're predictable. And that brings us to their central idea. There's basically a formula for disaster. It turns out there are two hidden forces, kind of built into the DNA of our modern world, that make these meltdowns almost inevitable.
The first ingredient in this recipe is complexity. Now, this isn't just about a system having a ton of parts. It's about how all those parts are interconnected, tangled up, and interacting in ways we just can't predict. A small hiccup in one corner can create these bizarre, unforeseen ripple effects somewhere else entirely, setting off a chain reaction that absolutely nobody saw coming. And the second ingredient is tight coupling. The best way to think about this is to picture a line of dominoes, but they're packed super close together. If one falls, what happens? The next one falls instantly. There's no time to intervene, no way to stop the chain reaction. Tightly coupled systems are exactly like that. They have zero slack, no buffer, no breathing room. When one part fails, it immediately and unstoppably takes the next part down with it. So here's the big reveal, the core idea of the whole book. When you combine that intense complexity with that really tight coupling, accidents don't just become possible, they become inevitable. A sociologist named Charles Perrow gave them a name, normal accidents. And that name is brilliant, because in these kinds of systems, failure isn't a bug, it's a built-in feature. It's just what they do.
And once you see this formula, you start seeing it everywhere. At 3 Mile Island, you had a complex mess of confusing alarms and controls tightly coupled with the cooling system. So a tiny valve issue cascaded into a near-nuclear meltdown. In the 2008 financial crisis, you had complex financial products like derivatives, all tightly coupled through global banking, which meant panic spread around the world in an instant. Heck, even in healthcare, a single typo in a complex digital record system can ripple through and lead to a catastrophic outcome for a patient. The pattern is just undeniable.
Okay, so if these failures are so predictable, why do they always seem to catch us totally by surprise? Well, here's the twist. The problem isn't just in our systems. A big part of the problem is in our own heads. We all have these cognitive blind spots that literally hide the danger even when it's right there in plain sight. There are a few big ones. First, there's tunnel vision, where we get so focused on one little detail that we miss the massive problem brewing all around us. Then there's the illusion of control, this deep-seated belief that we can actually manage systems that are way too complex for any one person to truly understand. And, of course, overconfidence, experts in one area completely dismissing warnings from another. But maybe the most dangerous of all is something called normalization of deviance. Just think about the Space Shuttle Challenger disaster. For years, engineers saw damage to the O-rings on previous flights. But because it hadn't caused a catastrophe yet, they started to treat this dangerous flaw as acceptable, as normal, right up until the day it caused an absolute tragedy.
So, I know, this all sounds pretty bleak, but here's the good news. We are not helpless. We can fight back against this. And that brings us to the solutions, what the book calls the 4 pillars of resilience. These are the core principles for designing systems that can take a hit, that can bend instead of just breaking.
The very first pillar is diversity. And this isn't just about demographics, it's about cognitive diversity, bringing people to the table with different backgrounds, different training, and fundamentally different ways of seeing the world. When you do that, you're way more likely to have someone on the team who spots an anomaly or questions a bad assumption that a more uniform group would have missed completely. It's one of our best defenses against those collective blind spots.
The second pillar is Slack. Our culture is absolutely obsessed with hyper-efficiency, just-in-time everything, no waste, no fat. But that creates incredibly brittle systems. A resilient system does the opposite. It embraces Slack. It has buffers, spare parts, backup systems. It might not look as efficient on a perfect day, but it's built to survive the messy, unpredictable reality of the world.
Third up is decentralization. In a fast-moving crisis, a rigid, top-down chain of command is a death sentence. By the time information gets all the way up to the top and a decision comes all the way back down, the situation has already changed. It's too late. Resilient systems push authority out to the edges. They empower the people on the front lines, the ones who are closest to the problem and have the best information, to make decisions and adapt on the fly. You see this in models like the Navy SEALs' decentralized command. And finally, we have the fourth pillar, which honestly might be the most critical of them all: psychological safety. You can have the most diverse team with tons of Slack and decentralized authority, but none of it means a thing if people are too afraid to speak up. Psychological safety is the foundation. It's creating an environment where people know they can raise a red flag, admit they made a mistake, or ask a dumb question without being shamed or punished for it. It's the only way that critical, life-saving information actually makes it out into the open.
So there it is. This is our toolkit for building resilience. You promote diversity of thought, you build in Slack and buffers, you decentralize authority, and you create a foundation of psychological safety. These four things don't just work in isolation. They work together to create systems that don't just survive failure, but can actually learn and get stronger because of it. Now, this all sounds like great advice for huge companies or government agencies, right? But here's the most powerful part of the whole idea. These exact same principles apply to our everyday lives too. Just think about your own world, your personal finances. Having high debt and no emergency fund is a classic, fragile, tightly coupled system. One unexpected bill can wreck everything. Savings and diversified investments? That's Slack. What about your family's schedule? If it's packed back-to-back with no downtime, it's brittle. One sick kid or a traffic jam can cause chaos. Building in unscheduled time creates resilience. Even your digital life. Relying on one single password manager or cloud service is a huge risk. Having backups creates that all-important Slack. At the end of the day, the core message of Meltdown is really one of humility. This dream of creating perfect, error-free systems is an illusion. We can't prevent every mistake. We can't foresee every failure. So the real goal isn't perfection. The goal is to build systems and lives that can fail gracefully, that are designed to bend without breaking.
So I'll leave you with this to think about. Where is the hidden fragility in your world? Where do you have that dangerous mix of high complexity and tight coupling in your work, your finances, or your life? And what's just one small step you could take this week to build in a little more Slack, a little more resilience, a little more breathing room?